History is a mirror. It shows us not just where we came from, but how profoundly different the world once was. Humanity has walked a long and winding road, and along the way we developed beliefs, rituals, and customs that to our modern eyes seem utterly bizarre. Yet for our ancestors, these practices were the very fabric of their reality, essential, logical, and sometimes a matter of life and death. Today, we journey back in time to uncover 20 ancient customs that make almost zero sense in the 21st century. Prepare to have your understanding of the past completely reshaped. Our first stop takes us to ancient Greece, the cradle of Western civilization. Imagine stepping into an open-air theater, the sun warming the stone seats around you. On stage, actors wearing elaborate masks are not just performers. They are considered sacred vessels, protected by the gods themselves. To harm an actor, even verbally, was to risk divine retribution. They moved through society with a special status, their craft seen as a holy act of channeling stories from the heavens to the people. It wasn't just entertainment. It was a religious experience, and the actors were its high priests. Now, we travel east of feudal Japan, where the samurai warrior lived by a strict code of honor known as Bushido. For the samurai, death was not something to be feared, but to be faced with grace. Before charging into a battle from which they might not return, these elite warriors would sit in quiet contemplation, take up a brush, and compose a death poem, or a jizei. This short, elegant verse was their final act on earth, a crystallization of their thoughts on life, nature, and mortality. It was a final expression of their soul, a serene farewell written in the shadow of imminent violence. Let's cross the globe to medieval Europe, a world steeped in superstition. Imagine being a farmer's wife, spending hours churning milk, but the butter simply won't form. You wouldn't blame the temperature or the cream. You would whisper of a curse. It was widely believed that witches possessed the power to bewitch dairy, their malevolent magic preventing butter from churning. People would resort to counterspells, like plunging a hot poker into the churn, believing it would burn the witch and break her curse. It was a time when the supernatural was a tangible, everyday threat. From the fears of the medieval kitchen, we move to the decadent feasts of the Roman Empire. The Romans loved their wine, but they had a particular taste for sweetness. To achieve this, they would boil grape juice in lead pots, creating a syrup called cepa. This syrup was a popular sweetener, added liberally to wine and food. What they didn't know was that they were slowly poisoning themselves. The lid leached into the syrup, causing widespread chronic lead poisoning among the aristocracy. For centuries, they traded their health for a sweeter sip of wine, a fatal preference that some historians argue contributed to the empire's decline. Our journey now leads us to the sun-drenched lands of ancient Egypt. Here, purity was paramount, especially for those who served the gods. Egyptian priests dedicated their lives to maintaining a state of ritual cleanliness. This dedication was so extreme that they removed every single hair from their entire bodies, from the top of their heads to the soles of their feet. They would shave or use primitive depilatory creams every few days to ensure not a single hair remained. To them, hair was an impurity, a worldly imperfection that had no place in the sacred temples of the gods. Let's sail north, to the icy shores of Scandinavia, home of the Vikings. On a cold, clear night, as shimmering curtains of green and purple light danced across the sky, a Viking wouldn't see a scientific phenomenon. They would see a divine spectacle. They believed the aurora borealis was the reflection of light glinting off the shields of the Valkyries, the mythical warrior maidens who chose who lived and died in battle. The lights were a sign that the Valkyries were riding across the sky, escorting the souls of fallen heroes to the glorious halls of Valhalla. From the cold north, we journey to the lush jungles of Central America, to the heart of the Aztec Empire. Here, a bitter, frothy drink made from cacao beans was not a common treat. It was a sacred substance. Chocolate, or zocolatl, was considered the food of the gods. Its consumption was reserved for rulers, priests, and decorated warriors, often used in solemn ceremonies. For a common person to dare drink this divine beverage was a grave offense. It was a symbol of power and spiritual connection, far from the candy bars we know today. Back in Asia, let's enter the forbidden city of ancient China. Here, status wasn't shown with jewels or fabrics alone, but with fingernails. High-ranking officials and members of the imperial court grew their nails to extraordinary lengths, sometimes several inches long. These weren't a fashion statement but a powerful symbol. Impossibly long nails were proof that you belonged to a class so elite, you never had to perform a single act of manual labor. They were often protected with ornate golden guards, a living testament to a life of pure leisure and authority. Returning to medieval Europe, we find ourselves at a wedding, but something is off. The bride, adorned in her finest dress, clutches a bouquet of fragrant flowers and herbs. This wasn't just for beauty. In an era where full-body bathing was a rare, sometimes yearly event, personal hygiene was different. The flowers were a practical necessity, intended to mask the bride's body odor and fill the air with a more pleasant scent. The bridal bouquet was originally less about romance and more about olfactory survival. Now, imagine a high-stakes political meeting in ancient Persia. A decision that could change the fate of the kingdom is on the table. How did they ensure they made the right choice? By discussing it twice. The first debate would happen while the council was completely sober, allowing for clear, logical reasoning, but they believed that was only half the picture. The second debate would take place while everyone was drunk. The theory was that if the decision still seemed like a good idea under the influence of wine, it must be a truly sound one. Honesty, they believed, flowed freely with wine. Let's travel to the soaring peaks of the Andes, to the sprawling Inca Empire. It was a civilization of immense wealth, intricate road systems, and massive cities, yet it had a stunning omission. There was no money. The entire economy functioned on a system of labor and obligation called mida. Every citizen owed the state a certain amount of work, whether it was farming, building roads, or serving in the army. In return, the state provided for everyone's needs. Wealth wasn't counted in coins, but in loyalty and communal effort. We return to Japan during the Heian period. A beautiful noblewoman smiles, but her teeth are not white. They are lacquered a deep, polished black. This practice, known as ohaguro, was the height of elegance for centuries. Black was seen as a beautiful, unchanging color, unlike teeth which could yellow or decay. Dyeing them black was a symbol of aristocratic beauty and maturity, particularly for married women. To them, a flash of white teeth was seen as garish and almost animalistic. In ancient Sparta, the city of warriors, strength was measured not just in muscle, but in silence. From a young age, Spartan children were trained to be laconic, to speak as little as possible, and to use words with precision and impact. Lengthy speeches were seen as a sign of indulgence and weakness. At public meals, boys were asked questions and expected to give clever, concise answers. Silence was a virtue, a discipline that sharpened the mind and prepared a man for the focused brutality of the battlefield. Let's step into a glittering Victorian ballroom. Amidst the polite conversation and strict social codes, a secret language is being spoken. A woman might press her fan to her right cheek. To an admirer, this meant, yes. If she drew it across her forehead, it meant, we are being watched. Victorian women used their fans to send discreet messages, navigating the rigid rules of courtship. The way a fan was held, opened, or closed could convey desire, rejection, or caution, a silent conversation happening in plain sight. Our journey takes us to ancient Babylon, a bustling metropolis of law and commerce. When two Babylonians made a deal, they would seal it by shaking hands. But this was more than a simple gesture of agreement. They believed that by physically clasping hands, they were creating a magical bond. Your word became physically bound to the other person through touch, making the promise sacred and unbreakable. It was a physical manifestation of a spiritual contract, a practice whose form has survived for millennia, even if its original meaning has been lost. Imagine walking the streets of a plague-ridden medieval city. You see the doctor approaching, but he looks like a terrifying, surreal bird. Medieval plague doctors wore long, beak-like masks. This wasn't for theatrical effect. They believed the plague was spread by miasma, or bad air. The beak of the mask was filled with aromatic herbs, spices, and flowers, like mint and rose petals. They thought this fragrant barrier would filter the evil air and protect them from infection. It was a primitive form of a gas mask, born from a desperate misunderstanding of disease. Now, let's visit a royal court in ancient India. In a quiet room, a prince and his tutor are bent over a checkered board. They are not just playing a game. They are learning the art of war. The game of chess, or chaturanga, as it was then known, was invented as a tool to teach battlefield strategy to royal children. The different pieces represented the 4 divisions of the Indian army: infantry, cavalry, elephants, and chariots. Every move was a lesson in tactics, foresight, and sacrifice, preparing the future king for the real-life battlefield. Our journey ventures back to the Americas, to the grand temples of the Mayan civilization. The king, seen as a divine intermediary, had a solemn duty to communicate with the gods. To do this, he would perform a painful bloodletting ritual. Using sharp objects like obsidian blades or stingray spines, he would pierce his own body, often his tongue or ears, and let the blood flow onto paper, which was then burned. The Maya believed that the smoke from the burning, blood-soaked paper would carry their messages directly to the gods, a painful sacrifice to maintain cosmic order. We return one last time to ancient China, but this time to the vibrant and noisy world of opera. The actors, with their painted faces and elaborate costumes, were more than just entertainers. They were cultural icons held in the highest esteem. Their status was so elevated that they were protected by imperial law. To physically harm a respected opera actor was considered a capital crime, punishable by execution. They were seen as living treasures, guardians of a precious art form, and the state ensured their absolute protection. For our final custom, we sailed to the vast Pacific Ocean. On the islands of Polynesia, a person's skin was their autobiography. Tattoos, or tatau, were not mere decoration. They were a living passport, a visual record of a person's entire life. Each intricate mark and symbol told a story: their lineage, their social rank, their skills as a navigator or warrior, and their major life achievements. A man without tattoos was a man without a past, a nobody. The painful process of receiving these tattoos was a rite of passage, etching one's identity into their very skin for all to see. From sacred actors to living passports, these customs paint a picture of a world governed by a completely different set of rules. They may seem illogical to us, but they were born from the deepest beliefs and most pressing needs of their time. They remind us that our own normal is just one version of reality in the long, strange, and fascinating story of humanity. Thank you for joining us on this journey through time. If you found these stories as captivating as we did, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow for more explorations into our incredible past.